We knew Earth was primitive, loud, disorganized, deeply tribal, still drowning in myths of gods, borders, and blood-soaked history. We'd been orbiting them for months, mapping cities, decoding languages, learning patterns. But what stood out most was how much they remembered. Every war, every scar, every atrocity. They wore pain like armor, and we were fools to ignore that. Command chose August 6th for the assault. The logic? Simple. Disrupt them on a date already heavy with meaning. They'd be busy mourning, distracted by sorrow. But I remember standing in the battle bay of our flagship thinking, why would we strike them on the day they remember fire and death falling from the sky? Nobody listened. They never did. I was just a reconnaissance officer, and I wasn't bred for strategy. Not like the Eltherian war minds, with their pride and arrogance stretched over 6 feet of bone and flesh. I remember how they smirked. They called Earth's nuclear history primitive emotional weakness, said they clung to pain instead of evolving from it. But they were wrong. The first wave dropped at 8:15 Japan Standard Time, the exact minute Hiroshima had been struck, 80 centuries earlier. We targeted the same longitude, same coordinates, not as a tactical advantage but as mockery. We vaporized a monument, flattened a museum. Our plasma charges didn't just kill people, they erased memory. Or so we thought. What happened in the next 60 minutes? I don't even know if I can call it war. It was vengeance, a kind I'd never seen before. Humanity didn't panic. They didn't run. No pleas for peace, no broadcasts of surrender, just silence. For the first 7 minutes. Then came the sirens. Old ones. Analog. They weren't coming from satellites or military bases. They came from street poles, rooftops, firehouses, echoes of a time when they thought their own kind would destroy them. And they had kept them operational, maintained like relics, ready like weapons. By minute 12, Earth's skies turned black, not from smoke, but from jamming. Every system we had went blind. Visual, thermal, PSI scans, everything collapsed. The humans had deployed EMP bursts, not from space, but from within, hidden in their own cities, buried deep in what we thought were museums and shrines. I remember Commander Threx screaming across the comms, demanding visual recon. We couldn't give him any. Every drone was down, every satellite hijacked. And then, at minute 15, the world turned red. They launched. Not missiles, not bombs. They launched people. We laughed when we first saw them on infrared. Jump packs, on biological bodies. Insane. They were sending up men with steel armor and fuel packs. And yet, they didn't miss. They weren't just soldiers. They were descendants of survivors. Great-grandchildren of firestorms and fallout. You could see it in the way they moved. Not fast, not furious, precise. Like each one of them carried the memory of 1,000 lost souls in their bones. At minute 20, they boarded our flagship. No one ever breached a Threxian hull before, ever. And yet, I watched a group of 6 humans, barely armored, tear through our command deck like they knew our layout better than we did. They weren't silent. One of them shouted before every kill. Names, not of the enemies, but names of people, cities, families, as if every blow was justice being delivered personally. I remember one of them, scar running down the side of his face, old and tired looking. He stared right at me and said, "You picked the wrong fucking day." I surrendered. I wasn't even armed. I dropped my plasma rifle and put my hands up. He didn't shoot. He just walked past me and headed for our engine core. By minute 36, Earth had reclaimed every ship we landed. Not just destroyed, reclaimed. Their engineers reverse-engineered our thruster systems during combat. They were using our own ships to shoot down our escape pods. By minute 42, the command fleet had been reduced to debris. Our backup forces never made it past Mars. Earth had jammed every route. We couldn't even call for help. We were ghosts in orbit. By minute 59, the last Threxian war general, Commander Threx himself, was dragged through the streets of what used to be Hiroshima. Still breathing. The humans didn't kill him. They chained him in front of a memorial and let the survivors spit in his face. And by the end of that hour, humanity had made it clear. They don't forget. They don't forgive. And if you make them remember the day the sky burned, they'll show you how much worse it can get. There was no debrief, no tribunal, no rescue fleet. I spent the first 6 hours after our failed invasion in a dark metal cell beneath what I later learned was a former military installation near Kyoto. It was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of rust and earth. My hands were bound with some crude-looking restraints, metal and leather, but they worked better than any containment field I'd seen. Humans didn't use unnecessary technology. They used what worked. I wasn't interrogated right away. No beatings, no questions, no shouting. Just silence. The kind that creeps into your bones and whispers that you don't matter anymore. They didn't treat me like a prisoner of war. They treated me like a lesson. A human male finally entered the room on the second day. Older, thin-framed, wearing a simple black jacket with a faded red ribbon pinned to the breast. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were made of steel. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask for my name. He pulled out a metal chair and sat across from me like we were two men in a bar, casually deciding how one of us should die. "You ever visit Hiroshima before you picked your little invasion date?" he asked. I said nothing. He leaned back, laced his fingers over his stomach. "Did you even know what it meant? Or was it just another file on your warpath?" Still, I didn't speak. Not because I wanted to be brave, but because I didn't know how to answer him. Our War Council had dismissed Earth's history as primitive. We had no reverence for human emotion. They saw tragedy as weakness and culture as noise. He nodded slowly, as if my silence gave him all the answers he needed. "Figures. Your kind looked at that day like a soft spot. Thought we'd flinch." His jaw tightened. "But Hiroshima isn't our scar. It's our spine. It's the day we remembered what we're capable of. What you people never understood is we don't hide from our pain. We build on it." I finally spoke. "You killed thousands of my people." He didn't blink. "You erased an entire fleet." I added. "Some of them didn't even fight. Some of them tried to flee. You hunted them down anyway." He smiled bitterly. "You want sympathy now, after you dropped fire on school children, after you melted old shrines and blew up a hospital to prove a point." I looked down. He leaned forward. "You brought death to the place where death was already born. What did you think would happen?" I could only whisper, "I didn't know." "That's your kind's problem," he said, voice low and steady. "You don't want to know. You think conquest is just a series of operations, but for us, every war has ghosts, and this planet—" He paused, pointing a thumb at the floor. "This planet is haunted by every name we never forget. Every child, every woman, every soldier who died because someone thought Earth was weak." He stood up, brushing off his jacket. "You survived because we want one of you to go back, to tell the others what happens when you piss on our memories." I looked up sharply. "I can't go back. They won't take me. Not after this." "Then stay," he said. "See what it's like to live among the ashes you created. Maybe you'll learn what we did, that fire can burn, but it can also forge." He turned to leave, but stopped at the doorway. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to the dome. You'll see the names, not numbers, names, one by one. And you'll understand why this planet may be behind on technology, but never behind on resolve." The door slammed shut. I sat in that cold room, surrounded by the weight of a world I didn't understand. Until now. a world that had survived its own apocalypse, a world that never wanted war again, but had learned to master it when forced. I wasn't a soldier anymore, I was a witness. And humanity had just reminded the galaxy what happens when you mistake grief for weakness. They brought me out at sunrise. The air in Kyoto was sharp and clean, the kind that stings a little when you breathe it in too deep. 2 guards walked beside me, not speaking, not armed with anything more than sidearms, and a kind of quiet confidence that made my skin crawl. I wasn't cuffed, I wasn't chained, but I wasn't free either. They didn't need restraints to remind me I was powerless here. We took a ground vehicle, wheels, not hover. It rumbled along old roads through neighborhoods that were still rebuilding. I saw cracked walls, children with wary eyes, elders sweeping rubble into neat piles outside small homes. Every face that met mine held the same expression, not hate, worse, memory. They remembered what we did, and what they survived. The vehicle stopped in front of a curved stone structure surrounded by trees with long, drooping branches. It wasn't large or flashy. There were no soldiers posted outside, just a simple arch with blackened edges and a path leading inward. The old man from the cell met us at the gate. "You're going in alone?" he said. I hesitated. "Why?" He looked at me with a strange mix of contempt and curiosity. "Because you need to hear the silence for yourself." I stepped under the arch. The temperature dropped, not from wind or shade, but from the weight of the place. Every step forward echoed louder than the last. The building curved around me like a whisper, pulling me deeper into its center. And then I saw them. The names. They were carved into black stone panels lining the walls, etched with painful precision. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Each name had a date, an age, and sometimes a single word. Mother, brother, student, poet, unborn. I stopped in front of one that simply read, Ayumi, 8. The moment I read that, something in me cracked. I don't know why her name stuck. Maybe because I'd seen her face, or someone like her. Curled in a bed of rubble, staring blankly at the smoke rising above the city as we hovered in, cold and efficient. I reached out and touched the engraving. The stone was warm. Behind me I heard footsteps. "You know what that wall is?" the old man asked, standing just behind me. I didn't answer. "It's not just a list," he said. "It's our chain. Every name, every life, links us to who we were and reminds us who we have to be now." "You turned grief into a weapon," I muttered. He nodded slowly. "We turned it into resolve. You didn't fall to our guns. You fell to our memory. The problem with your kind is you think emotion is a liability." He walked past me, hand brushing lightly over another name. "But it's our fuel. Rage, sorrow, guilt. We turn it into precision, into patience, into action when the time comes. You tried to break us on our most sacred day. Instead, you reminded us why we survived in the first place." I swallowed, still staring at Ayumi's name. "Your retaliation. It wasn't just military. It was personal." "No such thing as impersonal war," he said sharply. "Not here. You brought death with data and orders. We answered with names." He turned, eyes sharp. "What are your people going to do now, after this?" I shook my head. "They'll deny it happened. Say I went rogue. They can't afford to admit they lost." "Then they'll come again," he said flatly. I looked at him. "And what if they do?" He narrowed his eyes, voice lowering. "Then we'll remind them again. Every hour, every minute, until the stars know what Earth truly is." I looked around the dome one more time, and for the first time in my life, I understood what real power was. Not in weapons, not in numbers, but in memory. In pain you choose to carry instead of erase. And Earth carried it all. They didn't return me to the cell after the dome. Instead, they took me to a small house on the outskirts of the city. It was quiet, built from old wood and newer steel reinforcements. There was a single room, a narrow bed, a chair, and a dusty window facing a row of mountains. I wasn't a prisoner anymore, but I wasn't free either. The old man came by every day, never with guards, never with fear. He brought food, news, books. Sometimes he sat and said nothing. Sometimes he spoke about the past, about his grandfather, who survived the bombing as a boy and spent the rest of his life building peace with a heart still on fire. "You people see time as a line," he told me once. "We see it as a loop. It all comes back around eventually." He never told me his name. I started calling him the Warden in my head. Not because he imprisoned me, but because he kept me. Kept me in a place where I was forced to see everything I never understood about Earth, about humans. The days blurred. The world outside kept moving, rebuilding, remembering. I heard rumors, whispers of what happened after the assault. Earth didn't broadcast victory to the stars. They didn't boast. They simply cut themselves off. No signals, no diplomatic channels, no trade. Earth had gone dark to the rest of the galaxy, not out of fear, but out of fury. And the galaxy noticed. Ships stopped approaching. Trade stations rerouted around the solar system. Treaties were quietly rewritten to exclude Earth space from patrol zones. No one said it out loud, but the message was clear. They were scared. I wasn't the only survivor. A few others had been captured in different parts of the world. Some were executed, others vanished. I was one of the lucky ones, if you could call what I was now lucky. One night, maybe a month after the dome visit, I stood outside the house and watched the stars. The sky here was brighter than any I'd seen. No satellites, no artificial clutter, just space the way it was meant to be. I found myself wondering what my home world looked like from here. If they missed me, if they even wanted me back. The warden stepped outside, lighting a pipe with slow, practiced hands. He stared up with me for a while before speaking. "You know why we let you live?" I didn't answer. He didn't wait. "Because you're not a soldier. You're a witness. And witnesses carry stories." I looked at him confused. "You think they'll believe me? That they'll change?" He shook his head. "Number. But maybe your children will, if you live long enough to have any." I stared at him, and for the first time, I saw it in his eyes. Not hatred, but weariness. A kind of deep, endless tiredness that came from carrying too many memories and burying too many names. "They didn't just kill our people that day," he said softly. "They tried to erase our dignity, our grief, like it wasn't sacred." He turned to me. "You don't do that to humans. You don't mock our dead. You don't strike us on the day we kneel to remember them. And if someone does?" He looked me dead in the eye. "Then we stand, and we burn the fucking sky." The silence afterward was deeper than anything I'd ever known, not just between us, but across the entire planet. A silence filled with patience, rage, and terrible clarity. That was the moment I realized. Earth didn't just win a battle. They declared a truth. And that truth was this. Humanity may forgive over time, but if you dare to make them remember too soon, they will tear your world apart. Winter came quietly. Snow clung to the rooftops of Kyoto like soft ash, and for a moment I thought it looked beautiful, until I remembered the same haze falling during our assault, when dust and bone filled the sky. The white now felt like mockery, nature trying to cleanse what we had done. But the humans didn't cleanse. They remembered. The warden didn't visit as often anymore. He knew I wasn't going anywhere. Earth wasn't letting any of us leave. I wasn't under lock and key. I had food, warmth, even a shelf of translated books, but it wasn't freedom. It was exile with a front-row seat to what real strength looked like. I began to walk, every morning, miles through broken neighborhoods being stitched back together by scarred hands. I saw workers rebuilding walls we'd vaporized, kids playing with wooden toys outside structures we tried to flatten. People lit candles in windows each evening without speaking, like they were counting the lost by flame. And no one ever spoke to me. They didn't curse me. They didn't touch me. They didn't spit. They just looked. That quiet, human gaze that said, "You don't belong here, but you're going to feel every second of what you did." And I did. I carried it like an infection. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. The guilt didn't just sit in my gut. It lived there, feeding on the silence, on the names I saw in that dome, on the way the warden spoke about memory like it was more lethal than any weapon. Then one morning, without warning, he returned. He stood at the doorway of my house, coat dusted with snow, eyes cold. "You ready to see where the fire started?" I stared at him, not understanding. "Hiroshima," he said, "the real ground zero." The journey took hours by train. An old system, still running on ancient tracks. The humans never replaced it, never modernized it. The warden said it wasn't out of laziness. It was respect. You don't replace the veins of a place that still bleeds. The city was quieter than Kyoto. Not sad, just still. Like it held its breath each year and never quite let it out. He took me through a park, flat, wind-swept, clean, and stopped at the remains of the dome. The real one. Charred, half-standing, preserved like a monument to what had once tried to erase it. "This," he said, gesturing to the blackened steel bones, "was the moment we stopped being naive. The day we understood what other civilizations are willing to do for power. We were children then, not anymore." I stepped closer, touched the cold iron. It felt like regret. Heavy. Permanent. "Why show me this?" I asked. The warden didn't look at me. "Because this is where the world ended once, and we still came back. You need to understand that. We don't survive because we're strong. We survive because we refuse to forget how fragile life is." He turned to me, his face pale in the soft snow. "And your people, tried to make us feel that helpless again. That's why you failed. Because we've already been through hell. You just reminded us where the fire started." I couldn't speak. He stepped closer. "Go back. If they'll take you. If not, stay. Learn. Burn in what you helped build. I don't care. But know this, if the stars ever come knocking again with arrogance and fire in their hearts—" He took a long breath and looked toward the ruined sky. "We'll show them what happens when a grave becomes a battleground." We stood there in silence, two men from opposite sides of the galaxy, staring at a city that had already died once and still had the audacity to stand. And that's when it finally made sense. Earth doesn't fight to win. Earth fights so the dead never have to again. I didn't sleep the night we returned from Hiroshima. I lay on the stiff cot in my small room, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of names in my head. Not screams, not battle cries, names, software spoken, remembered. I began writing. It wasn't official. No reports, no data packets or tactical analysis, just words, broken, bitter words, scratched into a notebook the warden had left me weeks ago. At first I didn't know why, but the more I wrote, the more I realized. I was trying to remember what they did, what we did. Because if I didn't, someone else would come, someone smarter, colder, more prepared, and they'd make the same mistake all over again. The warden came by once during the third day of writing. He didn't speak, just looked down at the open pages on my desk and nodded once before leaving. That nod hit harder than any insult. It was his way of saying, "Now you get it." By the 7th day, I had filled nearly half the book. I wrote about the moment the sirens began to wail. I wrote about the human man who looked me in the eye before he killed my commanding officer. I wrote about the silence that followed, how it wasn't fear, but certainty. Humans didn't just react, they answered. They didn't scramble. They remembered. And that memory became fire. On the 8th day I was summoned. A formal request, not a demand. A human officer delivered the message. Tall, clean-shaven, coat buttoned tight. Not a soldier exactly, but someone with authority. "The council wants to see you." I blinked. "The what?" "Earth Council. Small unit. Post-invasion reconstruction. Strategic decisions. You've been discussed." I wasn't sure if that was a threat or a strange kind of invitation. They took me underground, deep, below the cities, past checkpoints and guards and long steel corridors that hummed with power. The meeting room was simple. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, one long table. 4 people sat at it, 2 men, 2 women. None of them smiled. None of them wore rank. The woman at the head of the table motioned to the empty chair. "Sit." I obeyed. She slid a folder across the table. Paper, not digital. Inside it, maps, photos, names, Threxian names, high-ranking officers, commanders, strategists, engineers. I stared at the images, stunned. "Where did you get these?" She didn't answer my question. Instead, she asked one of her own. "Will they come back?" I swallowed. They don't like admitting defeat. But no, not for a while. Not after this. "Define a while," she said. I paused. "A decade. Maybe 2. They'll be watching. But they won't risk another direct assault." One of the other council members leaned forward. "And when they do?" I looked around the table. "They'll come with diplomacy first. Treaties, smiles, then shadows." They nodded, as if they already knew. The woman spoke again. "We don't want war. We've had enough war, but we'll never be caught off guard again." I felt a strange tug in my chest, a mix of guilt and something else. Respect, maybe. "You've already changed," I said. "You've gone quiet. Cut off your signals. The galaxy is afraid." She met my eyes. Good. There was no arrogance in her voice, no cruelty, just clarity. Then she asked the question I didn't expect. "Do you want to go home?" I looked down. "I don't know if I have a home anymore." Silence stretched. Finally, the man beside her closed the folder and spoke. "Then maybe you stay. Help us. Give us what you know. Names, blueprints, weaknesses." I frowned. "You trust me?" The woman smiled, just barely. But we know what you've seen, and we know what you've written." She pulled something from beneath the table, a copy of my notebook. I hadn't even noticed it was gone. We read every word. That notebook had been a confession, a map of my shame. And now they held it like a weapon. Not to use against me, but against whatever would come next. "Help us prepare," she said, "so that next time Earth doesn't just survive." She leaned forward. "Next time Earth dominates." And in that moment I realized the galaxy hadn't just poked the wrong planet. They'd awakened it. I said yes. Not because I believed they'd ever forgive me. Not because I wanted to betray my kind. But because they already had. They betrayed me the moment they chose symbolism over strategy, when they picked a massacre date as a message and left us to burn for it. So I gave Earth everything: names, habits, protocols, maps of Threxian strongholds, and the flaws no one had ever exploited. I broke open every detail of our fleet systems, down to how we calibrated our sensor arrays and how long it took for us to reboot after a psionic jam. The humans listened with terrifying patience. They didn't celebrate, didn't smirk or posture like victors. Every fact I shared was met with quiet analysis, clipped notes, and swift implementation. They were building something, not revenge, a future, one that could end you before you even arrived. They brought in engineers, linguists, historians, biologists. They even brought in war veterans, not from our conflict, but from their own. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, the Cold War's silent ghosts. They merged Earth's blood-soaked lessons with alien blueprints I provided and birthed a new kind of doctrine: silent deterrence. Earth's new war theory wasn't about counterattacks. It was about making sure no one ever dared to attack again. I spent days in a lab beneath what used to be Yokosuka Naval Base, surrounded by things I recognized and things I didn't. They'd reverse-engineered our propulsion system into a stealth platform. Their scientists were splicing human resilience with our defensive shielding, creating armor that adapted to pain thresholds. Humans were building suits that responded to rage. The warden visited one night. No warning, just appeared in the corridor outside my chamber. "You're not doing this for us," he said. "So what's your reason?" I didn't lie. "I want my species to know they're not gods." He studied me. "And when they come again, they won't come like last time." "No," he said, nodding. "They'll come polite, smiling, with false peace." I nodded back. "That's when you kill them first." For the first time since I'd met him, he laughed. It wasn't warm, it was hollow, tired, real. "You've learned more than we expected." "No," I told him. "I just finally listened." Weeks passed. The Earth Council stopped treating me like a prisoner. They offered me a choice: live among them or vanish. I chose to stay, close enough to help, but far enough to keep guilt from choking me every hour. I moved to the outskirts of a desert zone they were rebuilding into a training field. Soldiers drilled not with pride, but with purpose. Each one bore a patch that read, "August 6th, we remember." They weren't building warriors. They were building warnings. One night I received a signal, encrypted in a dead Threxian frequency. Weak, desperate, and unmistakable. It was from my homeworld. A single phrase repeated 3 times. "Did they break you?" I stared at the signal for hours. Didn't reply. What would I even say? "Number you broke yourselves." They asked if I was broken, but they still didn't understand. Earth hadn't broken me. It had changed me. They didn't conquer with guns. They conquered with memory. And now, with my help, they were turning that memory into the galaxy's most brutal defense mechanism. I shut the console off, because next time someone tried to make Earth kneel, they wouldn't survive the minute. The final part. The hour of reckoning came sooner than we thought. It started with a whisper in the stars. A merchant vessel from Proxima Centauri reported a Threxian diplomatic cruiser entering Earth's exclusion zone. No weapons armed, no fleet behind it. Just one ship, painted white, moving slow, like a hand raised in peace. But we knew better. So did the Council. They called it what it was. A test. To see if Earth still had the fire in its bones, or if time had made us forget. But Earth doesn't forget. Ever, I was called back to the underground chamber beneath Yokosuka. The same council sat waiting, faces colder now, wiser, hardened by the years and the shadows they'd kept the planet hidden in. The woman at the head of the table didn't waste time. "They're sending a delegation," she said. "They're claiming innocence, that your fleet acted alone." "They're lying," I said. "They were watching everything from orbit. If they didn't fire, it's because they didn't need to. They let us bleed first." She nodded. "We agree. They'll offer trade next." I added, "Apologies, hollow words. Then once they get access to your systems, your defense grids, your satellites, that's when they strike." The room was silent. Then the oldest man at the table, the one who never spoke unless it mattered, finally said, "So we don't let them speak at all." And that was the end of it. The cruiser entered orbit 2 days later. They hailed Earth 29 times. No answer. They requested clearance to land in Geneva, New York, Tokyo. No answer. They lowered altitude, slowly, carefully, cameras on, translators live. The whole galaxy watched, and Earth waited, until the exact time, 8:15, Japan Standard Time, August 6th. Same day, same hour, because Earth doesn't just fight back, it remembers the moment you hurt it. At the very second the cruiser aligned above the Hiroshima Peace Dome, the sky opened. Not missiles, not nukes, not even laser arrays. Just silence. And then, black. The cruiser was swallowed by a cloaked orbital weapon, a human construct built in the asteroid belt, designed from reverse-engineered Threxian tech. Only smarter, simpler, stronger. It didn't vaporize the ship. It consumed it, crushed the diplomatic vessel into a ball no bigger than a stone. 0 survivors, no broadcasts, no warnings, message received. The galaxy trembled. Earth never spoke a word, but a new phrase spread across space like wildfire, whispered by traders and smugglers and frightened generals in back rooms across 10 systems. You don't visit Earth on August 6th, not to invade, not to talk, not even to mourn. That's their day, and they don't share it. Years passed. Earth never rejoined the interstellar councils. They didn't need to. They didn't want to. They didn't ask for recognition or reparations or war crimes trials, because they already had everything they needed: their ghosts, their resolve, and the fear of every empire that once looked down on them. I stayed. Not because I was welcome, but because I understood. I taught. I translated. I trained recruits who wore the patch that simply read, "Never again." I visited the dome every year, stood beside the warden who had grown slower, older, still wearing the same red ribbon on his jacket, still standing tall. He looked at me one morning as the bells tolled at 8:15. "You know what the stars call us now?" I nodded. "The grave planet." He exhaled. "Let them call us what they want." I looked out across the quiet city. "They can call it a grave," I said, "but they need to remember, this grave fights back." And with that, Earth stood. Not as a victim, not as a vengeful beast, but as a memory no one would ever dare rewrite again. We attacked Earth on Hiroshima Day. We didn't survive the hour, and we never forgot the lesson. Neither did they.